In today's video, let's hear the story of the murdered taxman and solve the mystery as to who could have committed such a crime, featured in the Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind. As per usual, the facts and information provided are brought to you by the game itself and the unofficial Elder Scrolls pages. The quest, Death of a Taxman, begins in the starting village of Sedanin. Wandering around town, the player may speak with its citizens and inquire about the latest rumors. Most will talk about the island of Solstheim and the troubles that are occurring up at Fort Frostmoth. However, once that rumor has been passed along, some citizens may speak of another. Almost any NPC can tell you this information, but for this segment, I went inside of Aurel's trade house and spoke with Tandram and Dallin.
What brings traveler?
He welcomed me to Sedanin, calling it the swamp fever capital of the world, which I had never heard of before. He offered to tell me where the services were and also about the latest rumors around town. Inquiring about the latter, he lowers his voice and says that he heard the local tax collector, Processus Vitellius, has gone missing. He follows up by saying it's no surprise and he wasn't well liked around here. This rumor doesn't technically begin the quest in your journal, but it does inform you of the missing person, his controversial occupation, and his reputation around town. If you weren't privy to exploring around the local banks and marshes of Sedanin, there's a great chance that this next part would have taken some time for you to happen across. Wandering up and down the sea banks to the west-northwest parts of town, you'll come across numerous mud crabs and rats. While they're seemingly easy creatures to defeat, they hide a troubling and dark secret. In a little nook surrounded by flora, rocks, and animals lays the lifeless body of Processus Vitellius. Examining his body, he has 200 gold on him, as well as the tax records and his commoner clothing. This is where the journal update occurs, and the quest is officially registered. Taking a closer look at the tax records, it displays a list of Sedanin citizens and the amounts they owe to the Imperial Legion. Beside the values, most of them have it checked off as to whether they've paid up or not. A lot of the values differ, as some citizens pay as little as 54 drakes, while others, like Aurel, need to pay 450. There are 5 names on the list who have not been marked off as paid yet. Those are Eldifier, owing 130 gold, Fargoth, owing 111, Finemouth, owing 54, Foreign Gilnith, owing 225, and Vodanius Nutchius, owing 87. With the tax records in hand, I rushed back to town and decided to speak with the guard about what I had just found. He seemed rather uninterested in my presence, telling me to move along. I told him about the murder of Processus Vitellius, and received quite a shocking response in return. He unenthusiastically said, "Found his body, huh?" and then said it's up to me with what I'd like to do with that information. He mentions that Socussius Urgala at the Census and Excise office would be the best one to tell this to, if that's what I choose to make happen. Exiting the conversation, I was really surprised about what the guard had to say. It made me wonder if the tax collector role has had occurrences like this before, or that maybe Processus really was a corrupt man. I went into the Census and Excise office, and made my way all the way back to the first room containing Socussius and Gansiel.
What's this then?
Speaking with Urgala, he asked what I wanted. I brought up the murder of the tax collector and received a more on par reaction with what I was expecting. Urgala was disappointed to hear about his death, calling Vitellius a good man. He wondered why he hadn't heard from him in a couple of days, citing these as dangerous times and this sort of thing can happen. He then met my second expectation of asking me if I had encountered all of the collected tax money, explaining that he has a job to do and he doesn't mean to be so blunt. I was then faced with 2 options. The first one was to say yes, and hand over the 200 septims. The other was to lie and say that I didn't find anything. I chose to hand over the 200 drakes. Urgala responded that it was odd that Vitellius was murdered but not robbed. He appreciates my honesty and says that if I'm looking for a little extra money, he'd like to see me find the murderer. The crime is apparently punishable by death, and I'm asked to bring this person to justice for a total of 500 septims. Leaving the office, I thought it would be a good idea to start with the citizens who haven't paid their taxes yet. Glancing at the records to see who the 5 were, I approached the closest one to me, Vodanius Nutchius. Vodanius asks me what my question is, and I inquire about the murder of Processus Vitellius. He responds in a similar manner to the Imperial Legion guard, but remarking that someone finally got him. He details that it's no surprise, as no one likes a tax collector, especially one who flaunts their wealth. He goes on to say that no one could tolerate the man, except for Thavir at the lighthouse. Apparently, the two of them spent quite some time together. He ends with saying he feels bad for her, as she seems like a nice woman. Unfortunately for my curiosity, anyone else I spoke with had the same response to this topic, citing that he wasn't well liked, but Thavir at the lighthouse was very close to him. Going over to the tower and entering inside, she opens up with the same dialogue as Tandra Mandalin. She welcomes me to the swamp fever capital of the world and asks if I want to know about the services or latest rumors. I bring up the murder of Vitellius, and it comes as quite a shock to her. She seemingly didn't know of his death, although many believed him to just be missing. She's in disbelief and says that he was the gentlest man she ever knew. They had become very close in the past few months, and she doesn't know what to do without him. She ends off her statement by saying she's only ever seen him get angry once or twice, and that he's never raised a hand at anyone. Asking further about Vitellius getting angry, Thavir says that it was hardly anger, more so an argument between him and the citizen Thorin Gilnith. The two were having a dispute about the owed taxes, as Thorin believed Vitellius was asking for more gold than required, resulting in him skimming from the top. Thavir says that's ridiculous though, as he would never do such a thing, saying that she's sure of it. She wants me to find out what happened and asks me to find Process's ring in order to give it back to her. Inquiring about the ring, she gave it to him some time ago and would like it back to remember him by. Leaving the lighthouse, it admittedly took me a while to find Thorin Gilnith. He's located inside of his house, beside Fargoth's hollow tree stump behind the trade house. I had never wandered in there before, much less bothered to look at who it belonged to. Entering inside the shack, Thorin was just standing there, almost as if awaiting my arrival.
Speak, traveler.
Speaking with him, he asked what I wanted. I brought up the murder of Vitellius, and he outright admitted to committing the crime. He practically boasted about it. He called him a fetcher and said he had killed him, remarking it to be a good thing that he did. He sticks with his story of accusing Vitellius of skimming from the top. He states that Vitellius would overcharge and pocket the difference. He also says that Vitellius was flaunting his money, showing off his new clothes and jewelry. He murdered him and left the body to rot, with all of the gold still on him. It's here that I'm faced with two choices. One is to believe in what he's saying and tell him that I won't say anything to the authorities. The other is to tell him that it's no excuse for murder and that his punishment has already been decided. By choosing the former, he says it's the truth and that the Legion have been gouging the citizens for years. He claims that the whole office is corrupt and that one of these days they'll all get exposed. He takes pity on Thavir, however, and hands over the ring she gave Vitellius so that I may give it back to her. Returning back to the lighthouse,
Speak, traveler.
I bring up Process's ring to her and she's happy that I'd found it. She's still saddened by his death and rewards me with 2 standard potions of healing, stating that Vitellius used to carry these while out on the job, and maybe that if he had them, he'd still be alive. Exiting the conversation, the rest of the town's citizens have all practically forgotten the murder, as it's no longer a dialogue option. Even back at the Census and Excise office, Urgala has nothing to say on the matter. In my opinion, this is the worst ending in terms of rewards, as all you get in return for your efforts are 2 health potions. Now, going back to the second option of challenging Gilnith for his crimes, he says I'm quote-unquote one of them and tells me to give it my best shot for killing him, finishing off with stating he doesn't mind spilling the blood of more Empire lackeys. Thorin fights with his fists and doesn't hit very hard. At the time of the fight, however, I had really low stamina, so he kept knocking me to the ground and wailing on me. I had to leave his house, rest until healed, and then I was able to return and kill him in 3 casts of frost magic. Here, I went into his inventory and took his small sum of gold along with Vitellius' ring. Recommended is to loot his house as it's no longer considered stealing and he won't be needing any of it anymore. The biggest piece of loot is the book, A Dance in Fire, as it raises mercantile skill and has a decent value attached to it. Leaving Gilnith's home, the dialogue exchange with Thavir is exactly the same as the other ending. She's happy about the ring being recovered and gifts you 2 health potions. It's interesting though that she never inquires about who killed Vitellius. Returning back to the Census and Excise office and speaking with Urgala, he notes hearing about my efforts around town and is glad that it's all said and done. He gives me my reward of 500 gold and remarks that it's good to see there are still citizens loyal to the Empire. That pretty much wraps up this quest. Technically, this was the second best ending in terms of rewards. According to the unofficial Elder Scrolls wiki, the most optimal way of doing this quest for a decent payout is to confront Thorin Gilnith immediately after locating the body. This still results in a fight to the death, but upon going to the Census and Excise office, the dialogue will skip straight to testifying about the murderer, and will result in you keeping the tax money along with the 500 gold reward. The only thing you lose out on is Thavir's potions and information, but this seems like a pretty good trade-off. On the lower tier of endings is by telling Urgala in the beginning that you did not find the money from the tax collector. He will simply thank you for your efforts and send you on your way. This results in 200 gold plus time saved, but the 500 or 700 gold endings seem to be worth the time, especially to lower level players. Now, it isn't really for me to decide who was in the right and who was in the wrong here. However, there are some clues and pieces of information that could shed more light on this matter. None of the citizens or guards in town were surprised to hear that Processus Vitellius was killed. In fact, the citizens said that he had it coming, as he would commonly flaunt his wealth whilst taking the gold from everyone. He wasn't very well liked, except by Thavir in the lighthouse. Even by the demeanor of the guards, it seems though that none of them were surprised of his death. Whether this is because of the job position in of itself, or his alleged corruption, is unknown. Now, while speaking with Gilnith, his main issue with Vitellius was that he believed him to be charging more gold for taxes than what was needed, and the difference Vitellius would keep for himself. Now, the only two people in this town vouching for Vitellius' character are Thavir Vedrano and Socusius Urgala. Urgala simply calls him a good man and that it was a shame he had to die like that. Thavir, on the other hand, claimed that he was the gentlest man she had ever met. They had apparently been close for a few months and she rarely ever saw him get angry. The only times he would express that sort of emotion would be while disputing amounts owed to the Empire with Thorin Gilnith. It seems as though the only other piece of evidence left to examine would be what Vitellius had on him at the time of his death. He had commoner clothing, the ring gifted to him by Thavir, 200 gold, and the tax records. The ring was a present and his clothes didn't seem very fancy. As for the gold, he could have just collected from Gerard and Thirlas, who owes that exact amount in taxes. The only thing that is odd, however, is just how much Thorin Gilnith owes. He needs to pay 225 gold in taxes, which is the second most and exactly half of what Arl needs to pay. The only thing is that Arl runs the only shop nearby, so 450 drakes is fitting. But Gilnith is seemingly a commoner. Due to his living conditions, he likely doesn't have that much income. So why is he being taxed far more than most of the people on this list? Well, perhaps he has a business that we're not aware of. Maybe Gilnith has refused to pay taxes for a while, so it keeps adding on. Maybe Gilnith has proved such a hard time for Vitellius that he only overcharges him out of spite. Perhaps Vitellius is inflating the numbers and we just don't hear anything about it. Or maybe Vitellius isn't even the one tracking the numbers and amounts owed. Maybe he's just the messenger and got caught up on the wrong end of the deal. Perhaps Vitellius was only kind to Thavir, a person of interest, and that's the only side of him she ever knew. After all, if Hriscar Flatfoot is any indication, the Legion has a tight grip around the citizens of Sedanin. Fargoth the Wood Elf can even vouch for that. There's a lot of unanswered questions, so an exact conclusion is almost impossible to come to. I'd love to know your thoughts on this, and until next time, keep on adventuring.